Okay, so we are jumping in to, by the way, this is my dog, Sweetheart, Sweetheart Bree. She doesn't know that she's on video right now, but sometimes she likes to sit on my lap when I videotape and use a computer. But we're jumping in on how information is presented, and we're going to be talking about order effects first. Now, order effects really draw from the work of Ebbinghaus. If you remember in Psych 101, you probably learned about memory, and he was the guy that pointed out the serial position effect. Now, it's not a concept that our book uses, but it relates to the serial position effect because he pointed out that in recalling information, we tend to be more inclined to are more likely to remember the first and the last things on a list, and that we tend to lose the information that is in the middle part of the list. So that relates to the primacy effect and the recency effect. So primacy effect is the over-influence on the information that's presented first in a body of evidence. As an example, I'm going to read you a description of a couple of people, and you tell me which individual would you rate as a more favorable, as having a more favorable character. So here's the first one. Megan is intelligent, industrious, impulsive, critical, stubborn, and envious. Whereas Michelle is envious, stubborn, critical, impulsive, industrious, and intelligent. It's highly likely that if you heard the last description, you would be influenced more heavily by the word envious, since that's the first one that I read. And if you were considering Megan, you would probably be more influenced by the first word that I read there, which was intelligence. So most of you would probably, if you didn't think that your psychology instructor was trying to trick you, you'd probably think or rate Megan as being a more positive character than Michelle. So that's an example of the primacy effect. The recency effect is when there's a disproportionate influence by the information presented last in a body of evidence. So for that, my example, my example is going back to that, remember that Salk experiment we talked about? In the Salk experiment, they had people choose their favorite sock out of several pictures of socks. So they had to view several and come up with the one that they would be most likely to buy. And a disproportionate amount of people that were in this study chose the very last sock that was presented, without any awareness that they really were using just a mental heuristic of just picking the last thing because that was the most convenient thing to do rather than going back and looking and comparing all of those socks. So that last sock that was presented had a lot more influence on their decision making. That's a recency effect. Now, framing effects is the influence that results from the way the information is framed. In other words, what are you highlighting? It can include the order effects, and also it can include spin framing. So spin framing is about framing information in its most favorable light. So our book uses the example of inheritance tax sounds a lot more positive than death tax, which really means the same thing. Okay, so another example of framing techniques that your book points out is they have an image of hamburger meat, 2 frames of hamburger meat, which are actually the exact same photo. One is labeled 80% lean, 20% fat. And the second one frames it the opposite way, presenting presenting the negative information first, 20% fat, 80% lean. So quite a difference there. And you can see by that example of the hamburger meat how by presenting the 20% fat first, it frames the meat in a much less favorable light than if it said 80% lean first. So information framed in negative ways will elicit stronger responses and avoidance. So in decision making, for most people, in the studies that they've done, people will avoid a loss much faster than they will go for and risk an opportunity. And so, for instance, say in an election year, you could influence somebody in their vote by stressing the bad things that could happen as a result of this person coming into office, while ignoring the positive things that might happen as a result that might actually outweigh and outnumber the number of negative things that could possibly happen. Confirmation bias is another phenomenon which skews our judgments. And you probably remember learning about confirmation bias in relation to research and the idea that sometimes when we test our own hypotheses, we tend toward noticing information that's going to confirm our hypothesis. And we tend to ignore or discount even information that might challenge our hypothesis. So, and this relates to the idea, the concept of belief perseverance, which means that once studies have been done that show that once a person has a particular belief, they tend to hold on to it. It tends to be quite stubborn. So even when being exposed to information that disproves their belief and in understanding that connection, they tend to default back to that original belief. So this can lead to, of course, false beliefs because we fail to attend to information that's crucial and that can disconfirm our original belief. It relates also to diagnosis. So, related to that stickiness of diagnoses, once you put a label on someone, then you tend to notice the behaviors that you associate with that diagnosis, and you might tend to overlook or ignore behaviors that disprove that diagnosis or that lend themselves to maybe some other explanation of the behavior, like a different diagnosis or situational factors that might be influencing the person. This graph represents the findings of a researcher, Crocker, from 1982. And this was a study where they asked participants to either answer the question, does practicing the day before a tennis match increase your chances of winning? That's what was pursued by under one condition. And then the other group of people asked the question, does practicing a day before a tennis match increase your chances of losing? So that's represented by the color in these bars. So the light green represents responses that where the participants were looked at seeing if practicing the day before led to a win, and the dark green represents responses by the participants that were asking the question, does practicing the day before a tennis meet decrease your chances or increase your chances to lose? Okay, so the approach to this, when they looked at what people actually went about their findings, as they tended to concentrate on only the information that confirmed their own, what they were seeking out, their own question. So in order to get the full information, they should have looked at not just the one question that they were trying to answer. So in this case, you can see those trying to find out whether practicing leads to winning were more likely to examine who practiced and won. Okay, people asking the other, ask the other question were more likely to examine only the instances where people practiced and then lost without looking at disconfirming evidence. Neither of the groups showed much interest in finding out about the number of players who did not practice and then won or lost. So that would be kind of a crucial information to get in really evaluating the whole thing in a more complex kind of calculation than just looking at one set of information that could lead you really to a wrong conclusion. Now, you might ask, are sometimes people motivated towards confirmation bias? And it seems like, yeah, it seems like we kind of tend to be that way. It kind of seems to be a default. So you kind of have to have a lot of humility and consciousness to resist that natural tendency. And so people do want to maintain a certain belief, certain consistency between our beliefs, and that actually is one thing that makes us feel like we are more trustworthy to others and more predictable. So it's interesting that even the evidence that people give on two different sides of a question, the same evidence, can be interpreted in ways that are going to confirm the bias of whoever it is. This example says that supporters and opponents of the death penalty were found to interpret the same evidence in opposite ways. Another example of confirmation bias is from a study where they showed a clip of a controversial call in a football game to the fans of the teams that were playing, and it was like a crucial game, and they had them watch the exact same play, and depending on what team the fan was cheering for, they tended to see something completely different. Okay, we'll talk next about the influence of schemas. And our schemas of events, situations, personalities, or groups can really limit our perceptions and our judgments in turn. So our schemas tend to select our attention. We tend to attend to that which fits into our existing mental schemas and either not notice or discount information that doesn't fit into the schema. So we pay attention to the things that we expect to see. A good example of this is that many of you have probably seen the gorilla memory study, where they had people pass a basketball around, and I'm assuming that most of you have seen it. I was going to provide a link for you, but then I saw that it was protected, so I couldn't do that. If you haven't seen it, go online and Google it, and you can experience it. I hope I haven't ruined your experience though, because if you are not knowledgeable about the study, most people do not even perceive the gorilla that comes into this group of people passing a basketball around because they're so intent on following the instructions of the study, which were to count how many times the basketball was passed from one team that was wearing white t-shirts. So you attend to the white t-shirts and where the ball is passing, and you totally